Greetings and namaste, truth seekers. So you're curious to know more about the Rockefeller Dynasty? Well, you've come to the right place. Anonymous has volunteered countless hours into thoroughly investigating and salvaging the history which survived all the censorship over the past century of deceit and cover-ups on this subject matter. Many people today don't even know who the Rockefellers are, and what they are responsible for, and with good reason. The Rockefellers have owned most of the American news media for the past century and have made sure that none of their bad rap was resurfaced by current journalists, to condition the younger generations to have no memory or awareness at all of their crimes against humanity, so that millennials can be used and targeted to build a new world order which will rewrite history and edit out everything they don't want future generations to remember about them. Like a kind of cultural amnesia, the Rockefellers have found over the years that if you repeat a lie long enough, that newer generations will fall for the propaganda and become apathetic to what older generations had been voicing and protesting over. They view this as a fresh start, to paint over their ugly past and pretend it didn't even happen. The Rockefellers were hoping that when older generations grow old and die, their knowledge of what they knew about them would be buried in the grave with them, or so they thought. The following feature is a great introduction to this complicated history if you're brand new to learning about the Rockefellers, and will be part 1 of a 4-part series to spread the information out so that you won't get overwhelmed with too much to take in at once. Please enjoy and consider helping us spread this information to imprint this history in the minds of millennials so that this history cannot and will not be edited to make the Rockefellers look like heroes to future generations. Thank you. And keep fighting the good fight with us, brothers and sisters.
Unlike his devout wife, William Avery Rockefeller kept away from the church. He was a traveling man, a salesman who sold quack cures from a wagon out on the western frontier. People whispered about his footloose life. They called him Devil Bill.
Bill Rockefeller admitted to one of his neighbors, "I do business deals with my sons and I always try to cheat them, to make them sharp." Now, John D. did not always like those lessons in business, but he absorbed them.
With Devil Bill, John D. discovered the excitement of taking a big risk, the allure of cold cash. Line upon line, as his earnings grew, his ambition quickened. He borrowed $1,000 from Devil Bill, with interest, and plunged into the risky business of commodity trading, buying and selling meat and grain. He was just 18. Only a year later, the something big he was looking for surfaced in the backwoods of Pennsylvania. Oil. News of the discovery unleashed pandemonium as thousands of speculators descended upon the region. Overnight, wildcatters stripped away whole forests and put up thousands of rickety derricks, hoping to strike black gold. As the oil gushed skyward, fantastic stories appeared of instant fortunes. Among the Cleveland businessmen lured to the region was John D. Rockefeller. He was no wildcatter. He saw that drilling for oil was a very risky business. Refining, not drilling, he decided, was where the steady money was to be made. Soon, a new rail line linked Cleveland with the oil region. Rockefeller built his refinery right beside it. It was one of the first in the city to produce kerosene, a new fuel for lamps that was cheap and clean. The poor man's light, as John Dee called it, would bring a brilliant glow into American homes. The soaring demand for it, he was convinced, would make him rich. Obsessed with the business of oil, he mastered every detail, developed new products to sell. By age 25, his refinery was one of the largest in the world.
It was at that point that John Dee began to conceive of the oil industry as one big interrelated mechanism. And you couldn't just change one component. You had to control the entire machine.
In a move that would transform the American economy, Rockefeller set out to replace a world of independent oil men with a giant company controlled by him. In 1870, begging bankers for more loans, he formed Standard Oil of Ohio. The next year, he quietly put what he called Our Plan, his campaign to dominate the volatile oil industry, into devastating effect. Rockefeller knew that the refiner with the lowest transportation cost could bring rivals to their knees. He entered into a secret alliance with the railroads called the South Improvement Company. In exchange for large, regular shipments, Rockefeller and his allies secured transport rates far lower than those of their bewildered competitors. Ida Tarbell, the daughter of an oil man, later remembered how men like her father struggled to make sense of events. An uneasy rumor began running up and down the oil regions, she wrote. Freight rates were going up. Moreover, all members of the South Improvement Company, a company unheard of until now, were exempt. Nobody waited to find out his neighbor's opinion. On every lip, there was but one word, and that was conspiracy.
What it really represented was the face of monopoly. It immediately became clear that the entire nature of the enterprise was going to change in ways that spelled their doom.
The image that was always used was that of the anaconda, the squeezing python-like grips of this economic snake that was just taking individual entrepreneurs and just putting them out of business and reducing them to kind of economic strait where they had no alternative but to really sell out to the principals in this conspiracy. It was a conspiracy, really. It was one of the first great economic conspiracies in this country.
In an effort to thwart the scheme, many independents refused to sell crude oil to Rockefeller and his associates. Undaunted, Rockefeller used the threat of the South Improvement Company to intimidate his rival refiners in Cleveland. His brother and business partner William characterized the plan as war or peace, sell out to Standard Oil or suffer the consequences. Rockefeller might create a shortage of the railroad tank cars that transported oil. He might go out and buy up all the barrels on the market, so a competitor would have no place to store his oil or ship it. He would even buy up all the available chemicals that were necessary to refine oil. Rockefeller instructed Standard Oil men to communicate in code. The company was nicknamed Club. John D. Rockefeller was referred to as Chowder. Many of Rockefeller's targets had no idea that the local refiners who were slashing prices and acting like competitors were actually part of Rockefeller's growing empire. In just 2 months, he had taken over 22 of the 26 Cleveland refineries, revealing the single-minded drive that would make him both the wonder and the terror of American business. Methodically, secretly, John D. Rockefeller was doing more than transforming a single industry. He was changing forever the way America did business. The day of combination is here to stay, he declared. Individualism has gone, never to return.
By 1879, when Rockefeller is 40, he controls 90% of the oil refining in the world. Within a few years, he will control 90% of the marketing of oil and a third of all of the oil wells. So this very young man controls what is not only a national but an international monopoly in a commodity that is about to become the most important strategic commodity in the world economy.
Oil was very important to America. Oil is important to America now, of course. Back then, oil was such a major factor in the U.S. economy. And John D. Rockefeller, the original Rockefeller, he began in a small way. He began buying up his competition. He was a ruthless businessman. He forced smaller competitors out of business. He grew bigger and bigger. There were no trusts. He literally had a monopoly on oil until Teddy Roosevelt came around and busted up big oil.
The Supreme Court of the United States dissolved the Standard Oil Trust. Teddy Roosevelt was president. He was a Republican, but he was a trust buster. So he broke up the AT&T monopoly, broke up the Standard Oil monopoly. But what ended up happening was the Standard Oil Trust was broken into about 25 different companies by state. So you had Standard Oil of New York, which later merged with Standard Oil of Kentucky to form Mobil. You had Standard Oil of New Jersey, which merged with some other Standard Oil state companies to form Exxon. Standard Oil of California was became Chevron. Standard Oil of Ohio became Sohio and then was bought by British Petroleum. Standard Oil of Indiana was Amoco. So you had all these Standard Oil companies that ended up being state Standard Oil companies. They merged with each other, these 25 companies. Eventually, became really more powerful than ever because of that, because there was, the Rockefellers, to Rockefellers, this decision by the Supreme Court was actually an economic boom.
In order to further expand his big oil empire, John D. soon found himself in need of big money and big banking. That's when the Morgans came in. The story of how the House of Morgan and House of Rockefeller got together to forge one of history's unholiest of alliances.
And the Morgans and the Rockefellers, were both financed by Jacob Schiff, Kuhn Loeb, and back in the 1800s, the big push in the United States was this westward expansion. So what the London bankers really wanted was, to basically tap into the vast resources of the West. And so they financed the Morgans and the railroads, and the Harrimans were involved with this too. Edward Harriman was a very powerful railroad man. The Vanderbilts were involved with this, Cornelius Vanderbilt. But the Morgan Bank financed it.
Nothing can operate inside the United States, whether it be in industry, in government, or in politics, without the endorsement and the support of the major banking institutions. The Rockefellers, of course, went into banking as well, and they, of course, had both an industrial base, they had tremendous interest in the oil sector, and also in financial institutions. And of course, this gave them a tremendous amount of power, not only in terms of production, but also in regard to politics.
It is important to note, Nazi Germany's war effort was largely supported by two organizations, one of which was called IG Farben. IG Farben produced 84% of Germany's explosives, and even the Zyklon B used in the concentration camps to kill millions. One of the unspoken partners of IG Farben was J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company in America. In fact, the German Air Force could not operate without a special additive patented by Rockefeller Standard Oil. The drastic bombing of London by Nazi Germany, for example, was made possible by a $20 million sale of fuel to IG Farben by the Rockefeller Standard Oil Company. This is just one small point on the topic of how American business funded both sides of World War II.
1956, America stood at the pinnacle of its prestige, and the Rockefellers were the nation's first family, not only of wealth, but also of power.
If there was an establishment in America in the 50s, it was these Rockefeller brothers. These young men have taken their place as these absolutely unique members of a unique family. They're, in some sense, the very tip of this kind of the American century, the American experience, this optimism that buoys America in the post-war era.
They were in many ways at the center of business life, conservation life, environmental life, political life. They were in the middle of it. That's exactly where they wanted to be, and they loved it.
Fortune magazine published a glowing profile of his grandchildren. Each brother was said to be worth upwards of $100 million. But more important than their wealth, Fortune argued, was the vast social empire which the brothers commanded. From their headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, their influence reached into every sphere.
Over the years, through the Rockefeller philanthropic enterprises, charities, support of science, their business enterprises, a web had developed which spread out and was interconnected with practically every center of power in our country and abroad as well. So this was the real strength and power of the family, going well beyond money alone.
Sometimes they would joke about it. They say, well, David gets Europe, Nelson is going to have Latin America, and John D. III gets Asia, and then they'd make some joke about what Winthrop got, which would be something like Arkansas. But nonetheless, there was something really behind the joke.
But going over American history, and I think this is very instructive, there have been different epochs in American history. America was pretty modest. It wasn't much of a developed country before the period following the Civil War. We had the age of the robber barons from 1865 to about 1901. America grew very, very prosperous. The railroads came into being. Large corporations were formed. This took place over that period, about 36 years. The progressive age succeeded it. It lasted until the 1920s. The roaring 20s followed that period. Roaring capitalism, gross excess. It came apart in 1929. We had the New Deal that succeeded that epoch, and then Harry Truman's Fair Deal, and then Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. And that ended in the mid to late 1970s. And ever since then, we've had the most extreme form of capitalism.
And it's not just the oil patch. The Rockefellers, they own, they control Honeywell, they control Monsanto, they control Quaker Oats, they control United Airlines, American Airlines, just on and on and on. AT&T, they control just a vast swath of U.S. industry. And all the insurance companies, New York Life, Equitable, these are all Rockefeller companies. So they vertically and horizontally integrated across the U.S. and global economy to a point that it's really almost like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, people won't believe it until they actually start researching it, and then the facts are just right there. So just go ahead and research it. Everyone should.
It was 1973 when the Rockefellers decided they needed their own State Department. That foreign policy was too important to be manipulated from behind the scene.
The formation of the Trilateral Commission in the early 1970s embodied David Rockefeller, and he had a tremendous amount of influence over the Trilateral Commission. It was an effort to create dialogue between wealthy elements within North America, Western Europe, and Japan.
The commission was founded by David Rockefeller. During this time, he was also running the Council on Foreign Relations, another elite international organization.
The reason they call it trilateral is because they were trying to integrate U.S. policy with European policy with Japanese policy. Those three entities, well, North American, I should say, because Canadians were also part of that. So it's this globalist, internationalist attempt, to basically create this new world order, to basically create this situation where national governments would no longer have power.
The Trilateral Commission is attempting to create a one-world government. Other groups, such as the Bilderbergers, have also been accused of pursuing similar goals. Several U.S. politicians, including Barry Goldwater, also believe the Trilateral Commission is an attempt to consolidate power and influence outside of the traditional political structure, ultimately with the goal of overpowering governments.
Sort of how powerful they are. I mean, Paul Volcker was the Federal Reserve Chairman in this country for many years, and when he retired as Federal Reserve Chairman, he became the Chairman of the Trilateral Commission. And if you look at what's happened since then with, for example, NAFTA, WTO, all these international trade agreements, these international, free trade umbrella groups, this is all an offshoot of the Trilateral Commission.
As many of you already know, the Rockefeller family is one of the wealthiest families on the planet, with independent estimates pointing upwards of $11 trillion US. The Rockefellers have a proven history of lying in order to conceal their true wealth. They own the majority stake of ExxonMobil, which is the world's largest publicly traded oil company and the world's largest company by revenue. Exxon holds the record for highest profits of any company ever. The Rockefellers also own J.P. Morgan Chase, which is the largest banking institution in America by deposits and market cap. Chase, in turn, operates the largest hedge fund in America. It was during David Rockefeller's years as chairman of Chase that he devised a plan to build the World Trade Center complex, and with the cooperation of former New York State Governor Nelson Rockefeller, the Rockefeller family commissioned the first designs for the World Trade Center. Along with the World Trade Center, the Rockefellers have been involved in many large real estate projects, such as One Chase Manhattan Plaza, the Council of the Americas, the Museum of Modern Art, Colonial Williamsburg, the Lincoln Center, the Embarcadero in San Francisco, and many more. The Rockefeller family has also been instrumental in creating and chairing various private and politically motivated institutions, including the Council on Foreign Relations. Moving beyond the Trilateral Commission and Council on Foreign Relations, the Rockefellers are also heavily involved in the Bilderberg Group. The Bilderberg Group encompasses influential players in the fields of business, media, and politics. They meet in secret locations once every 4 years and discuss secret plans. David Rockefeller is the original U.S. founding member of the Bilderberg Group, a life member and member of the Bilderberg Steering Committee.
Many have identified them as the kingmakers, the puppet masters that pull the strings behind the scenes. Meet the Bilderberg Group. There is a core group of members who have attended every year for decades, such as David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. These members invite others who are politically and socially relevant at the time. Each year, around 140 people are in attendance.
Ever since the Bilderberg Group first met, the exact purpose of the talks has never been fully explained. The delegates meet in secret for 3 days of discussions, but nothing they talk about is ever revealed afterwards.
For over half a century, no agenda or discussion topics have become public, nor is any press coverage allowed. The few invited are sworn to secrecy. Meeting procedures by Chatham House rules, letting attendees freely express their views in a relaxed atmosphere, knowing nothing said will be quoted or revealed to the public. Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, for example, who attended in 1991, there David Rockefeller told him why the North American Free Trade Agreement was a Bilderberg priority and that the group needed him to support it. The next year, Clinton was elected president, and on January the 1st of 1994, NAFTA took effect. Numerous other examples are similar, including who gets chosen for powerful government, military, and other key positions.
Documents released by the group in 2001 reveal that in September of 1955, the group met in Germany and covertly outlined the idea of a European Union. Section E, European Unity, discusses the general support for European integration and unification, and the idea to unify Germany once again with the rest of Europe under a common marketplace.
Ought to be set itself up as a group that is telling governments what they should do. Individuals within the group could, and I'm sure in many cases did, express their own views, and those views might have been influenced by the talks at Bilderberg, but they were expressed as individual views by the person, not the views of Bilderberg. I think the important thing was to get private citizens coming from different walks of life in the private sector to meet with people from public responsibility to discuss issues of mutual interest and concern in the world.
Bilderberg members include David Rockefeller Jr., Jay Rockefeller, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Tom Daschle, Chris Dodd, John Edwards, Tony Blair, Bill and Melinda Gates, David Gergen, Chuck Hagel, John Hines, Vernon Jordan, Henry Kissinger, Dan Quayle, George Pataki, current Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Bill Richardson, Paul Wolfowitz, and many more.
The list, while incomplete, represents the greatest amount of economic and political power ever concentrated in one single organization.
America and European countries, and I'm afraid too many others, have the best democracies that money can buy. The powerful interests, the powerful business interests get whatever they want because they buy the politicians. Sometimes they become politicians and then they recycle back into business. There is an unholy alliance between business, big business, and big government. It's true in America, it's true in Europe, it's true in many other countries. It really is an unholy alliance. And you combine these forces, one hand feeds the other. And they harm so many people in what they do. That's the way the system works. It certainly is the way America works. Politicians, corrupt politicians in bed with corrupt CEOs, and they literally steal what they want. They benefit each other. They harm the world. The politicians wage wars so that these ugly people, the corporatists, can make money. They like a zero-growth society. That one's a little bit obscure. It's hard to know what they mean by that. But they say, without prosperity or progress, only greater wealth and power for them at the expense of everybody else. I think a good way of explaining it is to explain what's going on now. There's no growth going on in most Western countries. Growth is actually declining in major ones: Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Greece, Portugal, Ireland. But the bankers are having a party. How can the bankers make money when the economies are declining? Because the central banks that they either own or control print all the money that they ask for. And what do they do with this money? They use it to make more of it. They speculate with it. They steal. They stuff their pockets. They pay themselves big salaries and bonuses. So they benefit just fine, thank you very much. Ordinary people are harmed. Poverty is out of control. Unemployment is out of control. Homelessness, hunger, deprivation at record levels in America. And yet the bankers are supremely rich. Their stocks doing very, very well. Their profits, their bonuses, extremely high in economies that are very weak. This is a perfect world for the Bilderbergers.
They believe in perpetual imbalance. They want to have artificially created crises around the world that will further increase their wealth.
They also believe in manufactured crises and permanent wars because wars are profitable. And the more that are fought, the wealthier they get. They want absolute control of education, to program the public mind, to train those chosen for various roles, and to train others to be compliant.
They want centralized control of education. They want us all to be learning their propaganda.
One size fits all. The size they determine, the size they want, the size that benefits them at the expense of everybody else.
They want centralized control of foreign and domestic policies. They want the United Nations to become the world government. They want United Nations taxes.
They want the UN to act as a de facto world government, imposing a UN tax on everybody in the world.
They want expanded trading blocs such as NAFTA and the European Union to reduce the importance of individual countries and of individuals to have control over their destinies.
They want global trade policies, rules that they make that benefit them and again that harm everybody else. A global WTO, World Trade Organization. Again, they make the rules, nobody else does.
They want to expand NATO and other regional military forces, again, to weaken the power of individual countries.
They want NATO to be a global world enforcer. Challenge them, and NATO will ravage your country, murder your children, enslave you, destroy your country, to turn it to rubble. That's the role they want NATO to play. That's the perfect Bilderberg world. They make the rules. Everything goes the way they want. Anybody dissented, kill them. That's the Bilderberg world.
Death of the globalist puppet master, David Rockefeller. Kit Daniels for InfoWars Now reports that David Rockefeller, a globalist central banker who advocated a new world order and mass population control while wielding vast influence over world leaders, he died on Monday at the age of 101. Yes, evil can live that long inside of a human body. A family spokesman, Fraser Seitel, confirmed his passing. They report here that Rockefeller was well known for openly bragging about the transnational elite's plans to centralize control over the world's population, wealth, and resources. In a quote here, he said, "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, what did he say? He said, I stand guilty. I stand guilty, and I am proud of it." That is probably one of the most damning quotes ever from his own memoirs. Rockefeller also revealed the extent of corporate media collusion with his game plan. They state here, quote, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years." Daniels reports that he said this at a 1991 Bilderberg meeting. He continues, quote, "But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practice in past centuries." They report here, Kit Daniels continues, that little of that has changed since 1991. Currently, the media outlets Rockefeller mentioned all vehemently oppose Donald Trump. Even more, they state the New York Times showered Rockefeller with praise in its obituary. They state, quote, "His stature was greater than any corporate title might convey. However, his influence was felt in Washington and foreign capitals, in the corridors of New York City, government, art museums, great universities, and public schools." They continue here. Daniels writes, "Mr. Rockefeller could well be the last of an increasingly less visible family to have cut so imposing a figure on the world stage."
You possess the power to impact the global narrative and to be part of the history. Please share this report, and to be the first to see more videos like this, click the subscribe link below. And be sure to check back for the other 3 featured presentations on this series.